Hey guys, this is Dawn Marie, and today we are making a gorgeous summertime lemon door hanger. It is one of my absolute favorites. It's so fun. But first, we have to cut out the door hanger using the laser. So let's go do that first. Okay, so we have all of the pieces cut out. Now you can do this on any back that you have. If you have a laser and you want to cut out the 3D pieces, you can use a different backing if you want, a different thickness of wood, say 1/4 inch MDF. You could do birch, you could do maple. You could even use one of those thick rounds that you buy at Lowe's or Home Depot and size your 3D pieces for that round. I just wanted to make it easier. So this entire project is made from 1/8 inch MDF, even the back. I love how lightweight it is, and it's really easy to hang on doors or your walls because of the lightweight. So let's get started in painting. So first thing I want to do is do the base. And so I'm going to remove all of my 3D pieces, and then I'm going to use a baby wipe for this base, and it's my favorite way to paint like a larger surface because you don't need to be perfect and you don't need to use a paintbrush, which sometimes will leave the stroke lines in there, and I don't like that. And so I just use a couple baby wipes, a couple layers, and it works really well. So I'm using Folk Art acrylic, just craft paint. You can use whatever type of craft paint that you want. I like Folk Art because it's a little bit thicker. So we're gonna take the baby wipe and wipe your paint on your board. Now, once you have a good base layer, you can see that it's kind of, it's not very solid yet, and that's totally fine because we're just doing the first layer. I'm gonna set this aside and I will come back and do a second layer when this is dry. So I'm just gonna set it aside so we can paint the other pieces. Now, one thing I'll note is that I like to use the Parent Choice baby wipes from Walmart. I find that they're not pilly and they work really well for this. I'm going to link all the supplies below, so if you want to see exactly what I use. And again, this is the Folk Art paint. I use Vintage White. I like using an off-white because white, it's just like too crisp for me, and so I like using the off-white for everything. And when it is on your sign, you can't really tell if it's a white or an off-white, but I just prefer off-white. So let's bring over these pieces. And now again, we're gonna work from the bottom down. So I'm gonna remove the top layer. And I also like to paint by color. So I wanna try to figure out what I want these colors. Now you can use any colors that you want. I'm gonna use a blue and a yellow and a green. I just think these are so like fun together. They're just nice and springy and summery and happy. And so I like to use some bright colors for, especially for summer signs. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start painting the yellow color. Now, I know because it's a yellow that I'm gonna need a couple coats. So we just wanna put a little bit on our plate. And then because it's a little bit bigger of an area, you can totally use a baby wipe or like a foam brush. And that is what I'm going to do, is I'm gonna use a foam brush for the main area here. And then I'm gonna go and use a sponge for the lemons. So let's get started on that. Now these outlines here are just for me to know where to glue down the letters. So it's not gonna matter if they are, you know, covered up or anything like that. So you can just go ahead and paint right over them. Now, if you don't have a laser and you want to do this project, I have this project available for the next month. I will have it up, so you can go ahead and order your own. I will link that below as well. I like to try to not get any paint on the edge of my design, and so that's why I kind of lift off the sponge towards the side so it doesn't get any paint on those edges. To be more careful as I get closer to these lemons down here, because I want to paint them, you know, the leaf is going to be a different color, and so I just want to be a little bit careful as I go towards the bottom. This happy is going to be covered up, so it doesn't matter if you get any paint on that. Because this brush isn't very precise, I'm going to use the sponge to get closer, the same one that I did the lemons with. So I'm going to kind of leave it just like that with a little bit of space. And now I'm going to switch over, because I'm already working with the yellow, I'm going to switch over to painting the lemons. Now this color is called Moon Yellow, and again, this is the Folk Art brand. And I'm going to be using a makeup wedge for painting. This is what I use pretty much for all of my painting. Now, some of these lemons are going to have another layer, kind of like that. So I don't have to get too particular with, you know, painting this. But we're going to go ahead and paint all of the lemons yellow. When you're painting with a sponge, I like to dab up and down. It helps cover well. Now, one thing that I'll do if I have layered pieces, as I'm painting, I will kind of position these where they need to go, so I can make sure that I'm not missing any pieces that need to be painted. So if this is layered on top of that, I can see that the rest of it is going to be green and maybe a little bit of brown. So I won't need any yellow on this bottom layer, but I will need to paint this yellow. Same with this one. That looks good. I got everything covered that needs to be yellow. And then I'll have this one on top of here. But you can see this needs to be painted yellow still. So as this is drying, is that I'll probably go over that with a second coat. So now I'll work on painting the individual lemons. now that those are painted, I'm gonna go ahead and set them aside. It's like this little dance. We do a painting, we set it aside, we bring it back. So now I wanna go ahead and do a second coat on this one. Depending on how your first coat covers it, you can either use the sponge and go over it again, or you can use something like a baby wipe to just kind of give it a nice second coat. And so that is what I'm going to do for the main piece, but I'm going to use my sponge to go over the lemons on the bottom to just make them kind of bright and stand out. Depending on the thickness of your paint as well and kind of the quality will determine if you need a second coat or not. Usually with the lighter colors, you do need a second coat. So don't be surprised if you have to go back over it again to give it, you know, covered nice and well. We will be highlighting these lemons as well, where that scored line is, with a mixture of the yellow paint with a little bit of green. Let's see, this is gonna be covered up, so. And so that'll give it a nice touch as well. Okay, so here I'm gonna do that second coat of the yellow with a baby wipe. Just gonna kind of ball it up, dip it in, and wipe it on. Now remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is what I love about painting like the bases, because you're going to add things to the top of it, like letters and so forth. And so you're not necessarily going to see every little tiny thing. And also with the base, like the circle base that we're gonna do, I'm going to add a little bit of distressing, which I'll show you in a second. So again, you don't have to have it perfect. So we're going to set that aside. And now I'm going to grab the base one more time. I'm gonna use the wipe that I had used, dip it into some white paint, and do a second coat to this base. Now the second one, you can see how much brighter that second coat makes it. And that's what we're going for. I will be adding some distressed lines to this with a paintbrush. So again, don't worry about it being perfect. We are not going for perfection here, because when it's all together, it's going to look beautiful. Another thing I'll note, if your baby wipe does start to pill a little bit, or you find little pieces are coming off, it's totally fine. Just wait until it's all dry, and then you can take a very fine grit sandpaper, maybe like 320, and just wipe it across, and that'll get everything off without wrecking any of your paint. So again, I'm going to set that aside, and we are going to work on the green leaves. So I'm going to get a little bit of paint. I'm going to use a mixture of a sponge and a small brush depending on which leaf I'm doing. So for these leaves up here, that's a larger area to cover, and so I'm just going to use a sponge. I'm gonna paint the branches green right now, and then I'm gonna go and just touch up a little bit with a paintbrush when I'm all down and add a little bit of brown. It is actually very easy to get precision with the edge of this sponge, which is actually really nice when you're trying to do little spaces. This is gonna have a second layer, so we're not gonna worry about painting in that lemon. Set that aside. So this one I'm gonna do a brush with. So I'm gonna check any of these to see if I can do a sponge. So this is a little bit bigger area. So I'm gonna do a sponge for here. And I will do a sponge over here. And if you get a little bit on your lemons, you know, you can always touch up later. Okay, so that's gonna be my first coat of the green with a sponge. And now we're gonna go and do a kind of fill in with a small little brush. And again, I get all of these supplies. Most of them are on Amazon, and I'll just go ahead and link all my supplies down below if you wanna grab yourself the same things that I use. Okay, so now we're gonna grab a little bit of paint on our brush and then get these smaller areas. All right, now it's time to set this one aside, do our little dance, and bring these back. I'm gonna go over a second coat with these, fill these guys in with the brush. Okay, so now as these dry, I'm gonna go ahead and start painting my letters. We are going to do a bright blue with them. Now, sometimes if your letters or your pieces or something that you're painting is really small, you can put down a piece of tape, like a masking tape or painter's tape, and stick it to them in order to help it not go anywhere. But these are a little bit bigger, and so I'm not really gonna worry about that. Plus, I don't really care if my hands get messy. So I'm gonna grab another sponge here. I'm gonna dip my sponge into my paint, dab it off. You wanna get kind of the excess off, and then go ahead and just dab up and down on your letters. Look at how bright blue this is, I love it. Again, the reason why we want to get the excess paint off of that sponge is we don't want a ton of paint oozing over the side of our letters, because we want to keep them pretty clean, which is another reason why you want to dab very gently, because if you squish it down really hard, then that's going to make that paint kind of ooze over the side of your letters, and you don't want that. Again, we're probably going to end up doing 2 coats. So this first one, I just want to make sure everything is covered well, but not really worry about the depth of the color right now, like the brightness of it, because that second coat is really where the brightness stands out. So as I'm painting these, I'm just setting them aside. Now, because we used very little paint, that first layer is pretty much almost dry. So we can go ahead and start right away on our second coat. See how much brighter that second coat is? I love adding the second coat because it just gives it so much like more vibrancy. So if you ever feel like your painting is like a little bit dull, just add a second coat. Okay, and that will be set aside and we'll work on our letters. Okay, so now my blue is done. It's got 2 layers, so I'm gonna set it aside and let it dry. While that is drying, here's the little dance again. I'm gonna get this bad boy and I'm gonna do the light distressing on it to just give it a little bit more character. And then also, this is how the white doesn't have to be perfect because you're adding a little bit of like black to the top or brown if you want. And it just takes away from the solid white. So like very little paint, and then use a paintbrush. Dip it in and then dab it off. You want very, very little paint on your brush. You can always add more, you can't take away. Okay, so just remember that. I'm gonna set that aside, and now I'm gonna gently brush this back and forth onto my sign until I know kind of how it's coming off of the brush, and then I can press a little bit harder if I wanted to. So this is just giving it a little bit of interest. And now, because I kind of want to give it that faux like planked look or shiplap, I'm going to accent a little bit more in certain areas. Now, a lot of this you're not going to be able to see because we're setting things on top of it. So again, if it's not perfect, don't worry about it. Add some to the edges over here. Okay, so see, it used like so little paint. There, I'm just adding a little bit of interest. Okay, so now, before we glue down, I realized I have to set this aside and do the highlights on our lemons. So we're gonna take a small paintbrush and I'm gonna mix together some yellow and some white. I'm gonna use the end of my paintbrush to kind of mix them together. You could use just another yellow, like a light yellow color of paint if you want, but since we already have this yellow and the white, I'm just gonna mix them together. And I'm gonna use a smaller paintbrush, dip it in my paint, and then just accent on the areas that I want a little bit of highlight on the lemons. that is done, what you can do, I'm gonna add a little bit of brown to my stems, but before you start gluing things into place, I like to go over and just make sure there's nothing that I wanted to touch up, that I like the colors of everything. There is a little bit of green over here that I think I wanna touch up, so I'm gonna find my paintbrush. I'm just gonna get this leaf a little bit darker. All right, and now I'm gonna grab my brown paint and that same little brush that I was using. And do a little bit of, actually I'm just gonna use this brush, of brown on the stems. This is totally not necessary because you could just leave it green, but I'm just gonna add a little bit of brown. Just for funsies. Also, this is a time that you can notice if you want to like touch up any areas. Like I'll go and touch that yellow up. Sometimes you just get carried away and you end up painting something the wrong color. But that's the beauty of this as well, is because it paints so well over each other. So if you ever mess up, just let it dry for a sec and then you can paint right over it. So it's really no big deal. All right, so that is done. Now, now comes the touch-ups. So I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow. Touch up over there. And a little bit of green. Got a little too carried away over there. Okay. I think everything is painted. So now I'm going to lay everything, all of the layers on top of the bottom layers, because you want to make sure that you're not forgetting something. So you want to put the lemons where they go, because look, I totally forgot to paint that leaf. See? Now's the time to go and fix that stuff before you glue anything down. Okay, while that's drying, I can go ahead and glue the Happy Summer down, because there's nothing really up here that I have to fix. But I always recommend laying everything down where they belong first before you glue anything in place, just to make sure it's exactly how you want it. And see how those scored lines help you line this up so you don't have to try to get perfect with your glue and just eyeballing it. So That looks good. Everything is painted. So I'm going to take it off and now I can glue it. And I can kind of see a little bit of yellow with that coming in under the happy. So I am just going to take, now you don't have to do this. This is just, I don't know, me being particular. I'm going to take a little bit of blue on my brush and just cover it up. A little bit. Okay. So, but now you have to realize, like, every time you do that, you have to wait for it to dry. So, because this leaf only has one layer, one coat now, I'm going to go and just give it a second coat quick. Okay. Now we can start gluing. So this one seems like it is ready. And look at that. I don't like how that leaf is, so I'm gonna just add some more green to it quick. Perfect. And now I want to lay it on there because sometimes you miss a little piece. That looks good. So now I'm going to glue it down. Now I'm going to show you, this is my favorite glue. It is Loctite liquid glue. It's professional. But I will say, if you are doing this at parties or having somebody else do it, don't use this. Use this only if you are in control of it, because it is very sticky. People will glue their fingers together. They will stick things where they don't want to stick things. Just trust me. Don't use this at parties. If you're doing parties, use a wood glue or a super wood glue, but not Loctite. And I was gonna say too, if I can get this bottle open, if you wanted to do this as a income producing thing, if you wanted to start parties, I do teach that as well. And so I will link all my things below, even wholesale. If you don't have a laser and you wanted to get started, I can show you all that stuff. So if you want to make them for yourself, that's fine too. And if you want to make some money at it, why not, right? Okay, so finally got the cover off. Now you don't need a lot, just kind of a little bit. And make sure you don't glue your fingers, and just lay it right down on top. And then just work your way around gluing everything in place. Again, setting it down first, making sure everything is painted how you want it, because this stuff ain't coming off. Okay, those are my bottom lemons. Now I'm going to do my letters. Now sometimes you can glue right on this letter, or you can take your glue, especially if it has a fine tip like that, and put your glue right on the base, which is what I'll do here. Making sure it's lined up. now we can do the happy. I'm gonna actually put the glue on the back of this one. You don't need glue in every spot, just kind of sporadically, especially if you're using this guy. Now I want to make sure it's lined up here. Perfect. All right, so now this guy is done and we're gonna set him aside while I just put this lemon on. Set it on there and look, you can see I didn't paint that little tiny piece. So I'm gonna go ahead and paint it. That looks better. Okay, so now that that is glued down, we have everything, all the layers glued down. And so now it's time to bring the base up. And figure out how we want this on here. So these edges are going to line up perfectly with the roundness of the wood. See, if we have it up too far, it's not gonna line up. So we want to just use our hands, figure out where the edges are. It's about like that. And then where we want this guy. About like so. So I'm going to glue this one down first because it's smaller. Now I'm going to flip this one over. Make sure I get the edges. And there you have it, guys. A gorgeous sign. I will show you how I hang it in a second. But I'm gonna lift it up. Look at it. So beautiful. Love it. Okay, so because this is very thin, a lot of people aren't sure really how to hang it. And so what I like to do is, and if you get the kit to make this at home, you will get these with the kit as well. These are little little back hangers. Okay, so we're going to double layer them. So you're going to glue the smaller piece to the back of the top one. You could also use 3M. A lot of people do that as well. Totally just depends on how you want to hang it. And I like to do 2 because then gravity does its thing and they don't have to be perfect. So you put them together like so, and then you flip your sign over. I'm gonna try to lay it down straight so I can kind of get it even. And then you're gonna glue these right to the back. And I like to do it about like so. You can either put the twine on them first, or you can put them down and then hang the twine. I like to do the twine first because it's just easier to get it through the holes and all that. So I'm gonna make one big circle. I'm gonna do about like this. Make a knot. Now you have your loop. You can either do it tight so everything is in the back so you won't see it, or you can do it high if you want the twine coming, you know, out from the top or from the back. Totally doesn't matter. So I'm just going to, I want it in the back. So I'm going to do it about like so. And again, gravity is going to do its thing, so it doesn't have to be perfect, which I love. And then we're gonna give this just a bit to dry before we actually hang it up. But that's it. Now you've got a hanger for the back, and you have your beautiful sign on the front. So again, if you want to make this yourself, I'm gonna go ahead and drop the link for the kit below, and it'll be shipped right to you. It'll have everything that you need minus the paint. I don't wanna assume that you want the same colors, and also shipping paint isn't the funnest thing in the world. So, but otherwise it'll have everything else. If you are a maker and you already have a laser, I'm gonna link the file below. You can cut it yourself and make it your own. And then if you also want to do this as a business or as a hobby, while you make a little bit of money, I'm gonna go ahead and drop that info below too. So hopefully that you liked this. I can't wait to see you in my next video, and we will talk to you soon.